Welcome to Paranormal M, where every episode delves into the unknown. Subscribe and enable notifications to catch all of our latest spine-tingling stories. Get ready for a thrill-filled experience. My paranormal experience as a hospital security guard. Let me start off with a bit of a backstory. About 9 months ago, I began working as a hospital security guard at a major hospital in my city. It's been the most exciting and enjoyable job I've ever had. I'm incredibly grateful for it. I made many new friends, and I've accumulated countless stories to share. The saying, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life, really rings true for me. I've had such a variety of experiences, from arresting trespassers to dealing with mental health patients and searching for missing individuals. The list goes on. But those stories are for another day. But today, I want to talk about something different. My experience with the paranormal. Before I started this job, I was already intrigued by the idea of the paranormal activity in a major hospital. I mean, people pass away in hospitals every day, so you'd think it'd be kind of a hotspot for ghostly encounters, right? Wish I could say I've seen ghosts chasing me down the halls, or bodies mysteriously moving on their own in the morgue. But honestly, nothing quite like that's happened. Still, I wouldn't be writing this if I had experienced nothing at all. To give you a better understanding of the hospital's layout, let me explain where this security is stationed. There's 4 main buildings that we cover. The first is the main hospital. That houses the emergency room with over 1,000 beds for both kids and adults. We typically have at least 8 guards handling calls in the building, with 1 guard stationed in the emergency room at all times. That's where most calls come from. It's worth noting that I'm in Canada, so anybody can come to the hospital for any reason, free of charge. The second building, located across the street, is an 8-story medical clinic that requires just 1 guard. This guard also has to patrol the adjacent old clinic building, which is now primarily used for treating children with eating disorders. This is where the story I'm about to share takes place. The last building is the cancer clinic, which requires 2 guards at all times, and is the closest to the medical clinic if assistance is needed. When I first started the job and was shown around the various buildings, the old clinic, which we'll call the Asbestos clinic due to its history of asbestos issues, immediately stood out to me as a building that, in my opinion, should have been demolished long ago. During my initial walkthrough, a fellow guard told me that this building was haunted by a young girl who took her own life on the 2nd floor. He also mentioned that the basement was haunted. The whole building used to be like a tuberculosis sanatorium back in the 50s or 60s. Had tunnels in the basement that were once used to transport bodies. About a month ago, it was my turn to work at the clinic during the night shift. I was determined to experience some paranormal activity. I had done countless patrols of the Asbestos clinic before, but nothing much had happened aside from the elevators occasionally opening on their own, which was apparently normal. But that night, things changed. I had heard plenty of stories from other guards about strange occurrences in the clinic, but I had never experienced anything myself. I decided to do my patrol at 3 a.m., which is often said to be the prime time for paranormal activity. I began my patrol by walking around the exterior of the building, checking all the entrances to ensure that they were locked. The building closes relatively early, around 8 p.m., so by then it should be completely empty. However, I noticed that one of the exterior doors was slightly open. This concerned me because, it had been closed during my first patrol. The building doesn't have any, interior cameras, so when something like this happens at night, I have to check every unlocked room inside to make sure no one is inside. I entered the building, started my patrol on the 1st floor, checking every door and every hallway. Well, no one was there. As I approached the elevator to go up to the 2nd floor, I heard a faint creaking sound like a door opening. I immediately radioed my team lead, informing her that I'd found an open door and I was hearing noises. I told her I was going to conduct a thorough patrol. She sent one of the guards from the cancer clinic, who we were going to call Fred, to assist me. After searching the first floor again and finding nothing, Fred arrived. He told me he would start searching the third and fourth floors while I covered the second floor in the basement. As I was searching the second floor, I heard the same creaking noise again, the sound of a door opening. I radioed Fred to come down, still not considering the possibility of anything paranormal. We've had instances of homeless people breaking in to find a place to sleep, though it's rare for them to target the asbestos clinic since it's usually locked. We searched every room in the second floor but found nothing. After thoroughly checking the entire clinic, we concluded that no one was inside. Fred returned to the cancer clinic and my team lead made a joke that it was probably just a ghost. It got me thinking, this might be the perfect time to continue my ghost hunting. Well, I went back into the building determined to capture some activity. I sat down in a chair on the second floor, waiting to see if anything would happen. About 10 minutes of nothing. I got bored and decided to head down to the basement. The basement is an eerie place, filled with tunnels that mostly lead to nowhere now. I decided to explore one of them since I had never done it before. Seemed like the perfect time. Once I exited the elevator, I made my way to one of the locked doors that led to the longest tunnel. Most of the tunnels were completely blocked off, but this one stretched on. I unlocked the door and ventured down the tunnel, taking note of my radio beeping to indicate that it had lost signal, a common issue in basements. As I reached the end of the tunnel, my flashlight started to flicker. I decided to stand still and listen. In my shock, I heard a blood-curdling female scream coming from the start of the tunnel. Nearly jumped out of my skin, I turned around, pointing my flickering flashlight back toward the entrance and started running toward the scream. When I reached the entrance, I tried to radio my team lead. My radio was still out of signal. Looked around the basement and noticed that one of the doors was open. This door was supposed to be locked, with only security having access to the keys. I looked inside the room, and I'll show a picture of that, but no one was there. My heart was racing. I closed the door, headed back upstairs to get a radio signal. I was still unsure if what I was experiencing was paranormal. Once I was back on the main floor, I radioed my team lead to let her know what happened. She sent Fred back to help me investigate the source of the scream. When he arrived, we went back to the basement. I showed him the room that had been opened. We both noticed a very distinct and strong smell. A smell like that of a decomposing body. Having spent time in the hospital morgue, I was all too familiar with that smell. We searched the room but found nothing. Fred joked that the room might have been used for tuberculosis patients who didn't make it, but in truth, none of us were sure what that room had been used for. We determined that everything was fine. I decided I'd spent enough time in the asbestos clinic for one night. Ever since that experience, I've rushed through my patrols in the basement as that smell sort of still lingers every time I pass by that room. So what do you think? Was this a paranormal experience or something else? Should I investigate it further? Let me know if you'd like to hear more stories I've collected during my time working in the hospital. Well, you know my opinion. Dead Dad Visits. Okay, so for the past 2 days I've been talking in my sleep. I've been cussing my fiancé out. Last night my fiancé seen my dad as an angel. My dad scared the crap out of my fiancé. I don't think my dad likes my fiancé drinking so much, so he said that my dad told him how much he loved me. Yesterday I had a dream with my 2 older brothers. My dad, Jay, and we were all talking in Paul, and I think I was talking and Paul told me I needed to stop what I was doing. Well, I was like, what is that? Then Paul's turned into paper, burned out in the front door. I hugged my dad in the hall away from our apartment. My dad scared my fiancé really badly to go to an urgent care because he didn't feel right. And also my dad kept saying things about a baby. I don't think I'm late, and I don't have any signs of pregnancy. I've had dreams about my dad before, but my fiancé said that he'd seen my dad by the window in our room with this walking stick. I miss my dad a lot sometimes, and I still talk to him, but this is a first. He's been dead for 4 or 5 years now. When he first passed, I had a dream of him walking to my childhood home. Before he got to my room, he floated up and a really bright light and white feather floated down. I've always remembered the dreams vividly about my dad. I believe that your dreams try to tell you something when you remember them. My dad has, I guess, always given me a heads up on what might happen, like deja vu. I don't really know what my dad's gotten into an uproar about, but yeah, this thing has been stressful in a few aspects of life. But I and my fiancé have always worked things out. I believe my dad's my guardian angel, looks after his kids still. But I'm at a loss of words. I know, like in my heart, it was my dad. But Will was the only one that's seen it by the window. I'm hoping tonight if we get a visit, it'll be, nicer. Has anyone else's loved ones, gone to them in their dreams? I've always loved my dad so much that, I was his baby girl, and I think he wants to protect me. But does this mean my fiancé's actions or intentions aren't the same as they were 4 or 5 years ago? We've been together 4 years September. The third will make another 4 years together. We'll make a solid 4 years together. I know my dad wants to protect me from getting hurt. Earlier this morning, my dad was talking through Will, and he said, "I hope this loves you as much as he says he does." When I met Will, he had given up on love, didn't have a significant other for 6 years. He helped me through a lot of things. He's never held me back and showed me things no one else has. I love this man, or else I wouldn't be with him for this long. It's the longest relationship I've ever been in. It's my dad trying to tell me. Not speaking on your dad's behalf, but I will say, things can always change, especially people. Things just age. People age and change. That's how I look at it. Strange event when I was a child. So, when I was a kid, I used to be terribly afraid of the dark. I would have to sleep with the closet light on and the bedroom door open in the living room. That's where my mom would be watching TV late into the night. My bed was situated in the room where my head was on the wall in the back corner of the room, looking directly out of the door into the living room. One night I woke up in the middle of the night. The closet light was still on and the living room light was now off because my mom had gone to bed. Everything was dead silent. I looked out of the door to the living room. That's where I saw a silhouette just beyond the reach of the closet light. It was human-shaped, looked male, and was tall. I would say about 6.5 feet or so. It was wearing a bowler-type hat. For what felt like hours, I just sat there staring at it. It never moved. I eventually meekly called out to it, asking who was there, but I didn't get a reply. Looking back, if it had been an intruder, that would have been a bad idea. But after this, I reached over to my bookcase, grabbed a light, keeping my eyes on the shape the entire time. I flicked on a flashlight and there was nothing there, just the living room. After a bit of time, I got up and walked into the living room and began searching the house again. If it were an intruder, I would have been in big trouble, but my search came up empty. The basement door was still latched shut, the attic doors behind that as well. So nobody was down there. Bathroom, living room, kitchen, parents' room, cat's room, both hallway closets, brother's room. No tall man with a hat. At this point, I was convinced that I had just been seeing things and went back to the living room where I looked in the direction of where I would have been looking to see the shape. But there was nothing that could have been making that shape, just the coffee table. That and an armchair and a strip of the site. So I went back to bed, and I laid down, shut off the flashlight. I poked out, just didn't see the shape this time. I've had a thing about being uncomfortable with open doors ever since. This isn't where it ended, though. I'd never told anybody about this encounter for years afterwards. However, one day my mom and I were talking in the car. She mentioned that like a year or two after I'd seen the shape, my brother had been really sick with a high fever. She'd been taking care of him, and he asked her who the guy in the hallway with the hat was. But when she looked, she didn't see anything. This immediately raised some alarm bells because, like I said, I didn't tell anybody about seeing it. Also, ever since I saw this man shape just outside my doorway, when I go through the living room, I get this deep, unshakable feeling that I'm being watched. The longer I stay there, the closer it gets. The feeling immediately goes away when I get far enough down the hallway and into my bedroom, and it only happens really late at night, around 2 or 5 a.m. Now there's one last thing that happened in relation to this. Besides still getting the feeling of being watched every night, I have to go to the kitchen or bathroom. I started a job and I was at work when a clearly disturbed man came into the store. He seemed to be deep in conversation with somebody who wasn't there, referring to the person who wasn't there as Alex during the one-sided conversation. As he was passing me, he stopped and looked behind me and up and said to me, "Who's your friend? Love his hat." That was just before he continued walking, and that chilled me to the bone. I do sometimes get this feeling just out and about and I'm just being watched for a few seconds, get really creeped out, so it makes me wonder if this shape follows me outside the house sometimes. It would be easy just to dismiss what he said, since he clearly wasn't all there. But it was really specific how he mentioned the hat and looked up as if we were looking at somebody taller than me. I think I'm living in a haunted house. I don't know how to start about it. So I and my friend live in a rented house for job purpose in another city from our hometown. We rented this 2 years ago. It was all good in the start, but a few months we suddenly started to get agitated at the smallest of things, getting ugly fights with each other, which never happened before. One night when I was not in the house, so my friend was alone in the house, he heard his mom calling his name from outside the house, and he saw, but nobody was outside. It was like 2 or 3 a.m. in the night. That matter was not discussed with me, and I was unaware of such happenings in the house. So one day I was cooking in the kitchen, suddenly felt a female standing behind me, a tall figure. I suddenly saw back and there was nothing, and I continued my cooking, and I heard knocking on the door, and I went there and there was no one again. I really felt strange. I didn't think of anything paranormal at the time, and after that, continuously, I feel like somebody peeking from the window and looking at me. So for basics, we've rented a house in which, on the ground and the first floor, the family and landlord live on the second floor. That's where we live. There's sort of a secondary terrace outside our house and the main terrace above our house. Well, I continuously hear footsteps on the secondary terrace, and this really loud gecko. And when I see outside, there's no one. One afternoon, I was alone in the house. I was trying to sleep and my eyes were shut. I wasn't really able to sleep, so I opened my eyes, and there was the same female entity just above my face, which I felt in the kitchen. In the blink of an eye, it vanished. I felt it standing at the door of the bedroom and staring at me. I shared it with my friend, and he said he's been having similar experiences. We tried to move out of the house multiple times, but literally all the situations turned against us. We couldn't move out. One time, we firmly decided that we'll move out and decided one house. The landlord of that house was very sweet. And we also moved there. We reached it in the evening when we were setting up the house, and suddenly the landlord came in a different avatar altogether. Started fighting with us in the worst way, I don't know. But We have to instantly move out of there, and it was very late in the night, so without any choice, we had to come back to the old house where we were experiencing all these things. So again, we failed in moving out. After we came back, the experiences have risen to like 10 times that we were experiencing before moving out. We don't know what to do. We're not able to move out, and we're not even able to stay in the house. All our energies get drained in the house. We have constant health issues too. If anybody has any solutions, what we can do, please tell me. That sounds rough. Old story, new life. This happened a few years ago, but was recently telling my roommate about it and decided to post it here. While I've never really been a skeptic, I've never had an actual personal experience until this point. I could tell a dozen stories from that place, but hands down the scariest experience I've ever had. In 2021, I was working as a private investigator for a security firm, and I would sometimes be called in to cover security guard posts. I was called in over a long holiday weekend during which a factory was going to be shut down. Covered night shifts, and during shutdown, everything in the building was powered off. Lights, machines, everything save for things like security cameras, lights in the office, alarms in the boiler, and Wi-Fi. This was a huge factory. It took roughly an hour and a half to make one round, and the entire building was pitch black. So in order to do rounds, we had like magalights. That and a cell phone to scan barcodes near the doors to track our movements. We also had to write down the readings from several pressure valves on certain water risers. 2 of the risers were 10 feet apart, and behind 2 large pieces of machinery along the back wall. To get the readings, we couldn't hold both the mag light and the cell phone, so we had to use just the cell phone to navigate. My first round had gone fine. No issues, everything secure, all doors locked, everything accounted for. I had just started my second round and was getting the measurements from the risers. I got the first reading, turned to my left, and was getting ready to walk the 10 feet to the second. That's when a shadow appeared in front of me. Didn't really have a distinct shape, but was human height and so black I could distinguish it from the already pitch black of the factory. It flew directly at me, passing through my chest. It was the most horrid, soul-deep, ice-cold feeling I've ever experienced. Collapsed on the floor, and while I don't know how much time had passed, I managed to call my boss. Thankfully, he came and found me, called EMS, and while he obviously thought I was nuts, the building had a reputation for paranormal activity and negative energy. It had ended the career of more than one guard, so we knew something had happened. When EMS came, my vitals were all over the place. My heart rate was 180, while my blood pressure was only 74/40. I was in the hospital for a couple of days dealing with tachycardia. While I doubt he ever fully believed me, my boss had seen me handle first response after a tornado, an active shooter, and a hostage situation with relative sanity intact. Even he admitted that whatever happened rattled me to my core. But I don't know what it was. A demon, a reaper, or just one very pissed-off spirit. But it was not friendly. To this day, just thinking about that experience gives me chills. It makes me sick to my stomach. Unexplainable incident about 10 years ago. I had some other odd experiences when I was quite young. My family described strange things in that time period too. But I was just too young, and I chalked what I saw up to memory distortion. This incident occurred when I was about 18. I remember it all vividly. This occurred in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, a town a little outside Tulsa. Staying at my grandparents' house, and my cousins were visiting. It was storming in the distance, but not raining where we were. So my cousin, brother, and I went outside to watch lightning. My cousin had described numerous strange paranormal occurrences that he had seen. And during this visit, he was describing seeing ghosts in, the peripheral of his vision. He claimed that other people who spent time with him were also seeing them, and that some of these people were being pussies about it. End quote. He wasn't a very nice person back then. As we sat on a brick wall watching the lighting in the distance, he was saying that he was seeing them here and there and describing what they looked like. Honestly, I really didn't believe him. Still not really sure I do. But at one point he freaked out and said that he saw what appeared to be a little girl. He said it was the freakiest one he'd seen yet. Began to feel a little bit unnerved, not really sure why. I remember that I still didn't believe him at this point, but the unease was growing pretty strong. I was starting to nervously glance around over my shoulder. Here's where the incident started. Turned around and I saw a figure of a small girl dart behind an air conditioner unit in the side of the house. I'm not sure what prompted this, but we all felt the urgency to get up and run at once. We didn't discuss anything. Thought in the back of my mind that it was my younger cousin. She would often follow us around. But the urge to run still persisted. It gets a little bit weirder. My brother stopped next to the air conditioning unit, looked where I'd seen the figure dart, and screamed. Again, quick mental processing, I thought maybe he was messing with her younger cousin who might have come out and followed us. But no, as I ran by, there's nobody there. We all three ran into the house. My brother and cousin went to a bedroom in the back of the house. I stayed in the front of the house trying to process what I'd seen. Eventually I went back to talk to them about it. They were both sitting there in a bed, and my cousin was like, "Oh yeah, look, he's scared," and laughed at me. He was a bit of a bully to me at this point. Tried asking them about it, and they denied seeing anything and didn't explain why we all ran. It's almost as though none of this even happened. In the years following, I brought this up with my brother on multiple occasions. He doesn't recall screaming, or even really remember the actual incident aside from us watching the storm and my cousin describing seeing the ghosts. I brought it up with my brother again a few days ago. Still doesn't recall any of the creepiness I felt in that situation. He has no recollection of stopping or screaming behind the air conditioning unit. Unfortunately, my cousin passed away about 8 years ago. He never did bring it up with him despite growing close to him in a few years before he died. That's my one unexplainable story I've encountered. It still creeps me out when I think about him. My cousin seems to be a sort of lightning rod for strange happenings. He had many paranormal stories, and I've confirmed some of the other people who were with him during these events. Moved around a lot, and some of the houses he moved to were straight up creepy. I think in that area alone he lived in 6 different houses. Anyway, I'm still not really sure what the hell happened there. I know this isn't as spectacular as a lot of the stories on the subreddit, but it still creeps me out, and I hope somebody enjoys reading about it. I sorta did. Never was a believer in the paranormal or ghosts. That was until this dreadful encounter. I never was a believer in the paranormal. That was till a damn near shocking encounter. After that, I'm a believer. Okay, how to start? My school would have a joint exercise with other schools. Each school would send 10 boys to camp with soldiers in a forest as a training exercise to learn basic survival techniques. On the first day we set up our tents, we went to sleep in the middle of the night and we heard laughing. The sounds of a girl crying. We all woke up, but we heard our commanding sergeant. He told us to lay low. Don't move. Just keep quiet till the sound stops. When we're laying down, sure as hell that we can hear where the sound's coming from. And basically, it's coming from above our tent. Well, I try to brush it away, thinking it's not possible. Might be a monkey or something. So the next day, it's as usual, nothing's going on, everything's going well. That's till the sergeant started punishing everybody who smokes and started asking them to do push-ups and jump, which I hated, so me and a couple of my buddies snuck out. Right beside our location, there's an abandoned swimming pool. It had toilet rooms, and for whatever reason, there's a dude in front of me within 1 foot, and he's walking the same direction with me heading to the toilet. I can specifically say that he was wearing a green t-shirt, jeans with slippers. Long-haired dude. We identically went into the toilet together with me behind him. With just a turn, he was fucking gone. I suddenly felt panicked, so I searched the whole toilet, which is maybe 500 square feet. There's no window, and there's no other door to escape. My friends arrived while I was searching around the cubicle. They asked me what's going on. I told them there was a fucking dude in front of me when I arrived, and he's gone. They started laughing. They thought I was joking or just trying to scare them. They brushed it off, starting to light their cigarette, and they helped me light mine too, because I felt something sort of suck out my energy till I can't even light my own cigarette. My whole body was trembling. I can't even smoke. After that, I felt something zapped me around my neck like it was electric. It was a weird feeling. Don't know how to describe it. I suddenly laying on the floor, like half passed out. 2 of my friends have to carry me back to the camp because both my legs are like paralyzed. Is my college apartment haunted? Me and my roommate just moved into our new college apartment 3 weeks ago. And from the first weekend, we had been having, issues. The first weekend we got drunk. I was laying in bed, and that's when I saw a tall black shadow of a person walk out of my bedroom. I was too drunk to care and just assumed it was my roommate checking on me. But it wasn't. After a couple of days, I kept seeing things out of the corner of my vision. But that honestly isn't new for me. But then one night, my roommate messaged me, asked if I was knocking on her door. I was in bed. She said she kept hearing knocking all along her walls. And at one point, it was at her door, and it was so loud she genuinely thought it was me. At first, I just thought she was hearing the upstairs or the neighbors, but the next night, I heard loud knocking on the wall next to my bed. It sounded just like a person knocking, like my wall's sort of next to the living room, not another unit. The other night, I thought I heard her yell something to me. I messaged her and asked if she said something. She said no. Asked if I just knocked on her door. I said no. Right after this exchange, my cats in the living room started going crazy and hissing. At this point, we both thought somebody had broken into our apartment. Walked into the living room, no one was there. Went into her room. She said she heard what sounded like somebody in boots walking in her living room. Her door faces the living room, by the way. At this point, me and her freaking out. It sounds like somebody was in her living room. Ever since that night, 2 nights ago, we've both been hearing voices, knocking and walking. But this morning she said that she saw a full-on shadow of a person walking alongside a wall. As after that happened, I decided to make this post. We've also been smelling a rotting smell that we can't exactly identify. Any help debunking or similar stories would be appreciated. Men in Black, EOL visits. A very close friend was dying of cancer. He had no religious, spiritual, paranormal beliefs. He was on narcotic medication, which might explain a lot. I've known several terminally ill people who have not experienced anything like what he did. Again, doesn't mean it didn't play a part. Several months before his final decline, not on pain meds, he began interacting occasionally with someone invisible to others. Mostly brief comments. "Get out of here. Shut the fuck up." And when pressed, he admitted that he was seeing a tall man with undefined features in a black suit and a tie, apparently staring at him, somehow waiting. He said he knew it sounded nuts, but asked me to believe him. After a while, the man began telling him that he'd be taking him, quote-unquote, away, and it would be sooner than later. Friend's angry exchanges with him to leave got even more in depth. Then he started seeing 3 men in black. The 2 new ones shorter, all sitting silently on a sofa at the foot of his bed. And he wasn't yet in hospice. Each holding a folded black suit like theirs. Friends said that they were insisting he put one on. Around that time, we started also asking if we saw those damn kids, in quotes. Short, blurry, black kid-type creatures. They'd dart around in his bedroom. He was afraid of them. Kind of annoyed, too, by the men in black. And by the way, the men in black is my term. He didn't call them that. One night he told me that he and the first men in black were friends now. He was seriously considering putting his suit on, but he was afraid the kids would do horrific things to him once he did. He'd done some regrettable things in life. He knew about them. He lost 80% of his voice right before he died, and the day he did die, he clearly and fearfully cried out, "The damn kids!" Apparently they were upon him. The men in black had lied. I've heard of the Hat Man, Shadow People, EOL visions, and more, but these men in black and the kids seemed very different. It all scared me, for my buddy at the very least. Wondering if anybody else has had or heard of anything similar. Creeped out by experience, and now stuck with nightmares. So this is a bit of a strange one and a bit long. But when I was 9, my grandmother passed away. I remember asking to see her grave, and eventually my parents took me. We were going for a day trip to the beach. My parents took me and my sisters to go see it. We took a very different way to the beach so we could pass the cemetery and pop in. I remember every single detail from the teddy bear in the grave my mom said was left by her sister. What my mom said, the lettering on the grave, my dad saying that he would turn the car around at the turning at the bottom. Every single detail. The only strange thing was that the drive back out of the cemetery seemed so much longer than going in. I mean, like a lot longer. Everyone in the car was so quiet. My 9-year-old brain just thought it was a big graveyard and everybody was sad. Then for a while after, I'd ask my mom to visit the grave and she'd say, "Yeah, soon." Then it was a mix of, like, sometimes it would be, "Yeah, soon," and she doesn't have a grave till... Like, is it soon or does she not have a grave? I was confused and stopped asking. But I always held the memory so close. 23 years later, I'm doing a lot of ancestral research and asked my mom about Nan's grave. She said she doesn't have one, and she was cremated and her ashes were spread in the Garden of April in the cemetery. There's not even a marker. Confused, I told her what I remembered, and she said that it was impossible. Spoke to my dad, he said the same. Spoke to my older sister, she said the same. Finally, my younger sister, she couldn't remember properly, but remembered visiting a grave that could have been Grant's. I spoke to my husband about it, and we decided to go take a look. It's pretty far from where we live, and going through the gate was the same as I remember. The grass and trees were the same as I remember, and the car park, the gates to the graves you could drive to. There's even an area to turn around at the bottom. The road looked the same. Everything. The only thing was, the road to the area was very short, though. Literally 70 feet, if that. Everything was the same as I remember. But there's no grave, it's only a garden for ashes. I checked the graves at the bottom end, and she wasn't there. So I'm just shocked because what I believed for such a long time isn't true. Now this may seem like a random memory of a grieving 9-year-old, but this isn't the only one. So like I said, I'm on a path to find where our ancestors are buried. Find out a bit about them too. Moving over to another cemetery, Arnos Vale. It's picturesque and Victorian. It's a beautiful place. My dad would tell me about how his gran used to take him to visit. His mom was a child and kept the grave pristine. So I thought I'd go try and find this grave. It's a huge place, but with the directions from my dad, I found it easily. cleaned the grave up a bit. It was quite overgrown. I had permission from the people who run the site. So while I stood there just after finishing, everything went so quiet. The wind stopped, and I couldn't hear any people or cars. No grasshoppers, nothing. It was so still. Then I felt a really strange presence up the path. The bushes were moving like the wind was blowing, but there was no sound. I was creeped out by the feeling, and I went home, and all night I knew I had to go back. Something was missing, and I needed to find it. So the next day, I did go back, past my great-great-grandmother's grave and up the path. I walked for what felt like ages. Quite healthy, but quite tired, and stopped to take a break. This path was uphill and winding. When I stopped, I looked at the grave I was standing next to, and, well, I recognized the name. Pulled my phone out, looked at my family tree, and found it. It was my great-great-grandmother's brother. I was shocked, but I was excited. I knew there was something there, and I was right. The path back seemed so long I continued walking up the hill and round, eventually looping back around to where I started. I didn't go back for a few weeks, and I decided to go tend to my great-great-grandmother's grave again, then on to her brother's grave. It was a walk, but I thought exercise is exercise. Now the path I walked before that took such a long time was only 40 feet down the path. It took no time at all. Now I'm confused. Twice in 2 different cemetery paths have been a lot longer than what they are. I now have reoccurring nightmares that I'm stuck walking down long paths in cemeteries. I can't get out. Well, I certainly know why you're having those dreams. So would I. Weird bell ringing in the woods. I'd love to know if anybody knows what this means or could debunk this. But this happened in our Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This is 2 weeks ago. Me and 2 of my friends were going on a walk at his papa's cabin, which is very isolated. The closest neighbor is over 5 miles away. We were going on a walk to like a bear blind his papa has made. A bear blind, never heard of that. It's about a mile-long trail of rugged snow-covered hilly terrain, very dense bush. We began walking around 4:45 p.m. Everything was great. The sunset, skies are clear, 50-degree breeze blowing. About 3/4 of the way, though, one of my other friends hears a bell ring. It's pretty close to us. Sounded maybe 15 feet away. We look over and there's nothing but trees, leaves, and endless woods. We both stared at each other with our eyes wide, just asking if we heard that bell. We both nod, but my other friend didn't hear it. I believe it's because he was wearing a ski mask and a hoodie over his ears, while me and my other friend had nothing over our ears. We were questioning whether to go toward it, but I said we probably shouldn't. His papa has nothing built out there except tree stands and trail cams. I feel like there shouldn't be anything that, well, would make that noise, especially as close as it was. Both described the bell to have a pitch of the doors that have bells on them when a door swings open, but it was a singular ding. What's weird was the direction of where the sound came from was a drop-off to a steep hill that goes down about 40 feet. I just read some stories about hearing bells in the woods, and some people were saying it was spirits warning you to get away from their area. But I don't know. If anybody knows what it could mean, that'd be awesome. It was very creepy. Never made it to the bear blind. I don't know if anybody else knows what you mean more than you. Demonic entity in the house. About 10 years ago, I lived in a haunted house in Australia. It was a real creepy old place, and from the start, shit was weird. Started off with the AC turning off and on and blasting freezing air in winter, but only when we left the house. It had a hallway that went behind our lounge room, and every time somebody would walk down it, the TV went to snow. So one night, we're sitting there watching TV, just the 2 of us. Then all of a sudden, we hear running footsteps run down the hallway towards us. The TV goes to snow, and when we expect to see somebody come blasting around the corner, nothing. I could still hear the running footsteps as they came right up to where I was sitting on the couch. Then it stopped. I was shaken. This house had a bathroom about 3 meters from the bedroom. One night I woke up suddenly to the sound of running water. I tried to wake my boyfriend at the time, but he was dead asleep. I got up to have a peek around the corner, and I could see the bathroom sink on full blast. My blood ran cold. I felt my stomach drop. I ran back to bed and I hid like I was 5. This type of thing was happening constantly, to the point where I was suggesting putting up cameras in the house, but my boyfriend just refused. He was very scared of, what he would capture. One night we both fell asleep in the lounge room. I was woken up, but a thud happened to my left. Boyfriend was to my right. I immediately opened my eyes and looked to my left when I saw nothing. I then looked right to check to see if it was still there, and when I looked at his face, he had his eyes wide open, glaring at me with his mouth open like he was about to scream, but he was frozen. And that was terrifying. By the way, he remembered none of this. We had a kitten come stay with us for a while, and one day he left it in the house to go, and got home, couldn't find it anywhere until we heard its meowing coming from inside a key-locked room with absolutely no way it could have gotten in. This thing was physical with me also. I was watching TV by myself when I heard it run to the lounge room, and this time it didn't stop. Ran to the back of me and ripped my ponytail downways. Forced my head to jolt back. I was so scared I just started crying in disbelief. I had instances where I would be walking through the house and I could hear it walking behind me, even talking a couple of steps after it just stopped just to creep closer to me. I'm sure more happened in this house, but this is all I can remember, and to this day, the experience from that house still terrifies me. Can anyone help me figure out what I witnessed years ago? Okay, this happened years ago, and I mean decades when I say that. I was driving down a pretty rural road in Alabama with my now ex-husband. And there was what I can only describe, and I've attempted to draw what I say as a red stick figure with a triangular head run across the road in front of my car. I was running from left to right, and if that matters, in a sort of strangle-wobbly fashion. Its head seemed to move back and forth in an unsteady, unbalanced way, almost as if it could fall backwards if it ran too fast. Its arms flailed up and down in a horrible imitation of how we use our arms when running. It was more like a flail as well. The legs were bent backwards at the knee like some birds. I don't remember getting any feelings from it. It just happened so fast there wasn't much time besides glancing at my ex and, well, did you just see that? He described exactly what I saw, so I know it wasn't a hallucination. Several years later, I saw the Coco Pelli statue in Utah. I was reminded of what I saw, and the movement presented by examples of the petroglyphs displayed there. I've attempted to draw what I saw, and I've no artistic talent at all, but hopefully it helps if my description isn't clear enough. Does anybody know what this could be? It reminds me of the wacky waving, inflatable arm flailing 2 men outside of used car lots. Except scary. My house is haunted. Yeah. So 2 years ago I moved in with my mom. And before that I didn't notice anything strange. The only thing I did notice was this weird feeling that makes you kind of uncomfortable. Thought it was just me because I wasn't used to being in that house. I almost never went there because it was far from my dad's house. At this moment, my room was beside the front door, and I remember as soon as I walked into the room, I felt like somebody was there. Yeah, that feeling. And over time, I began to feel trapped, like my room was like a cell and I wasn't allowed to go out. I started to feel extremely sad and also angry, but mostly sad. And also after weeks, I just didn't want to get out of my room. I know, it can be a lot of things. I have moved, and it was while the pandemic was happening, and I did miss my dad. But my mom decided that I was going to be upstairs with my sisters, and that my brothers would take my room because it was bigger. I was upset, but life. Then shit happened, and it kept happening. One, I started to feel like somebody was holding or hugging me when I was trying to fall asleep. Yeah, I was crying because even though it wasn't anything bad, it still was scary because it's not normal if your brain is just like, there's a problem, girl. Sometimes it was also caressing my hair or just touching me. Keeps going. 2, sometimes it knocks on my door or tries to open it. Or I hear footsteps, like for example, my room is next to the stairs and I hear somebody walking down or up the stairs, like knocks on the wall and windows, things like that. I often hear whispers, people talking, but not voices that I know. That was number 3. Number 4, the biggest thing that happens, at least to me, was 5 months ago. We have an attic, so since I'm upstairs, I'm right below the attic, and one night about 2 or 3 a.m. I heard a ball rolling. Then the footsteps of a child running the same direction as the ball. My curiosity was too strong, so after a few days later, I was curious, but I was afraid to die, so it took me a while to decide. Don't touch me. I decided to go visit my wonderful attic, and guess what? No floor, nothing. Just moss and dust. So how the fuck I heard these footsteps, I don't know. And even if it was an animal, I wasn't supposed to hear any noise if there was no floor. So this is what I noticed, but there is more. The first room I had was before my stepfather's and my mother's room. She told me that she often woke up in a panic because she was drowning. Yep, you read that right, she was drowning. She had water in her lungs and her mouth, and she woke up and she would spit out water. Lots of water. Our attic has burning walls. We don't know why, but we think it's part of the reason why the house is haunted. In our basement, there's a pentacle drawn with paint. Hope it was paint, some weird stuff. Don't really know a lot about the basement. My mom doesn't really want to tell me, I guess. But there's so much flies into our house. But our house is clean. I live with household potholders. Our house is clean as fuck, I swear to God. Small rebuttal. Your attic, if the walls are currently burning, put the fire out. You should not have burning walls, but I'm sure the end result has already occurred. And if you have a pentacle drawn with paint in your basement, paint thinner, more paint perhaps, flies in your house, get a bunch of cinnamon and sort of burn it above your stove. If you have a house with windows, make a crosswind and they won't be interested anymore. An old scary story my mom told me. Not long ago, my mom and I were talking about ghosts and scary stuff. Since the house she now has is also haunted, she's lucky. She told me the scariest story she could possibly tell me. That day she needed to do the laundry. For that, you need to get downstairs in the basement. She got downstairs, and while her way down, she started to feel anxious. Watched, a bit scared, that weird bad feeling that tells yourself that you should not stay there. But like I said, she needed to do laundry. So that's what she did. She was putting the clothes in the washing machine. This feeling was still there and it was growing. She tried not to give it attention but kept doing what she was doing. But the sensation of being watched was now more menacing than before. It was harder for her to just ignore it. Then while she was still putting the clothes in the washing machine, she heard something growl. A long, menacing growl. It was coming far from her. So my courageous mom decided to stay there, just going faster because now she was truly scared, understandably. A couple of seconds after, she heard it again, a bit more close to her, a lot more menacing. She finally started that washing machine and now she needed to take the clean clothes and bring them upstairs. I was taking them to transfer them in the basket. She heard it again. It was closer, so close that she felt its breath caressing her neck, and in panic she finally decided to just get upstairs, getting out of the basement. Not even after she got to like the third step, she felt something grabbing her foot. Not exactly, but you know. No, I do not. She almost fell at the hold, and again she heard this growl. Luckily she didn't fall, so she kept going faster, scared. Then not even at the half of it, she suddenly lost her breath. She described it like somebody was strangling her, just without the feeling of hands around the neck. She also felt like there was a hold on her, making it harder for her to step upstairs. It's like somebody was pushing her, forcing her to get back to the basement. Fell at that sudden hold she felt. Without air, she literally needed to crawl upstairs. Plus, she was pregnant at the time, and just imagine how hard it is to crawl and get out of the situation. She finally reached the door, and she said as soon as she passed that door, she closed it, and her breath came back immediately. She was no longer feeling this weird feeling and this sensation of being watched. She was now safe. I was sleeping in that basement, and I never felt or experienced something like it. I don't know why. Maybe since she's religious, something bad tried to, I don't know, hurt her or something. If somebody has an explanation or questions, it'd be great to read it, and I'll be glad to answer. My late uncle warned me in a dream. This is my first time posting here, and I guess I would say I'm the type of person who would be more likely to accept something as purely coincidental before ever considering it, being connected to the paranormal. That being said, I believe that ghosts exist, that our soul must go somewhere after we pass, but I've never seen cold hard evidence that ghosts can interact with the living. But this would be one of the most compelling experiences I've had in that regard. My entire life, my parents had a couple that were their best friends. We'll call them Ricky and Lucy. Nice choice. Lucy and my dad had gone to the same high school. And my dad met Ricky when he was dating Lucy. I can't believe I confused myself already. Forgive me, for I'm starting over. For my entire life, my parents had a couple that they were best friends with. We'll call them Ricky and Lucy. Lucy and my dad had gone to the same high school. My dad met Ricky when he was dating Lucy. Ricky and Lucy married, my mom and dad married, and they all became very close friends who hung out often. I was frequently around Ricky, Lucy, and their son to the level that I considered them my family. Like an aunt, uncle, and cousin who I spend more time around than any of my actual family members with those titles. Ricky was relocated across the country for work. He went to a coastal city that was a very popular vacation site. It was much different than our small middle-of-nowhere town that I was around maybe 8 years old in. Well, this was a bummer for my parents because they would miss their best friends. But we now had a really cool place to go on vacation to once a year, and we did the following 2 years. My parents enjoyed these trips so much they made huge, spontaneous, and life-changing decisions to move there as well. And this decision no doubt had a monumental impact on the trajectory of my life from the moment forward. I can't imagine the life I would have had if we hadn't moved when I was 11 years old. Our entire family still lived in the small town that we moved from, so we all were out there in that regard. There's Lucy, Ricky, and their son. So they became family even more at that point, spending every holiday and birthday with them at their home, or maybe ours. Now fast forward to 5 years ago. Due to years of binge drinking and not being mindful of how catastrophic that is to a person's health over time, Ricky was diagnosed with some sort of liver or kidney disease. His health declined rapidly. The once boisterous comedian full of life and energy became a more hunched-over, quiet, elderly, and gray man. Literally, he looked gray all over. His skin, his hair, his eyes all went dull. The time I spent with him during the final days were mostly painful. constant reminders that he wasn't the Uncle Ricky that I'd been used to my whole life. He was very irritable. Everybody was sad, and it was simply painful. And forget me, Lucy was clearly devastated. She held herself together very admirably, but nobody would have faulted her if not. Even in those final days, there were a couple of moments that Uncle Ricky looked at me while saying goodbye, and I saw an old glimmer in his eyes flash back. Where he cracked a witty comeback in the midst of a tense moment, and I was reminded that he was still there. But the inevitable day came when my dad came to my brother and I, trying to hold back his tears. He couldn't. He informed us that Uncle Ricky had passed away. We hugged him as he let out his tears, and it was the only time I'd ever seen my dad really cry. Sometime within the following weeks, I had a dream. I'd walked out into my kitchen to see Uncle Ricky standing there in full health and full energy. I ran to him and hugged him tightly, saying, "I'm so happy that you're alive. Thank God that wasn't real." I was so overjoyed, nearly to tears. Remembering the dream, feeling my heart released from so much concern about my dad's pain and grateful that he wouldn't be so sad anymore. He hugged me back and made some sarcastic joke about my dramatics. Then he said, "Yeah, I'm still here, so don't drink my beer. I need that." Critical detail here is that all Uncle Ricky ever drank was a very mainstream common brand of beer, nothing else. There's no one else in my family or who I knew had commonly drank this beer specifically, but it was such a common brand that it really isn't like something that would be weird for anybody to drink from time to time. Yet it was specifically his one and only common beer of choice, and he drank nothing else besides maybe water from time to time, obviously. I didn't know what he meant, but in the dream I just agreed that I don't have a memory of how it ended. I obviously woke up, but soon realized it was only a dream. The next day I was off work, spending the day at home, relaxing and enjoying myself. I had the urge to have an adult beverage. I didn't feel like driving anywhere or spending much money, so I looked in the refrigerator, hoping maybe there was something I could snag and offer to replace later. I was temporarily staying with my parents at the time and transitioned between moving out of my apartment and moving in with my then boyfriend. I opened the fridge and it was disappointing. As I scanned the shelves, just hoping there was something, anything would be fine, just for a little buzz. I wasn't a big drinker, I just wanted to add a little bit of jazz to my day. All I could find was a single can of the same beer that Uncle Ricky used to drink. If I hadn't had that dream the night before, I'm telling you I would have drunk it no hesitation. It would have served the purpose and needed it for, basically perfectly. But I thought back to that dream and even I thought it was silly and impossible, surely. I ultimately decided not to drink it. Didn't want to get some type of bad juju on me, so I just got over it and got some from the store. The story would have been kind of interesting if I left it just that. But there's more. A day or two later, I saw the can open and empty at the counter's edge where we placed cans to take out to the recycling bin. My mom was in the kitchen baking something while that was happening. I asked her what she was making. She said she was making beer bread for Lucy. It was to serve at Ricky's celebration of life the following day, and he made that with the last can of beer that was left in the refrigerator when he died. I felt a rush of shock. I said, "Wait, was that the can of beer that was in her refrigerator the past couple of days?" My mom confirmed, "Yeah." I couldn't believe it. I was so relieved in that moment that I had not drunk the beer. I started imagining the heartbreak that would have caused Lucy, specifically due to the sentimental value of it being the very last specific can of beer that Rick had ever purchased for himself. I felt very strongly in that moment that Ricky had actually visited me in my dream to intervene. He saved me from the shame and guilt of ruining the final moment of honoring her husband that Lucy needed to put her at ease. Saved Lucy from the pain of having that taken away. After already losing the love of her life, I was so grateful he had done that. Could this have been a coincidence? Sure, but I will add I rarely, dream as an adult, and I rarely so vividly remember my dreams. But this one really sticks, and I know I would have downed that beer without a second thought had I not had the dream. The fact that it wasn't just a random beer somebody had purchased was the actual last beer left behind by Uncle Ricky himself. So powerful and compelling. What do you think? I would say that that boat holds some water. I think an entity apologized to me in my sleep last night. Growing up, we lived in what used to be an old Victorian boarding house in London. The street used to be an old carriageway, so the house had a lot of people passing by it. My family moved into it when I was 4. From what I've been told, the house was pretty much sitting vacant for 7 years before we moved in. The previous owners never wanted to sell it, but didn't reside in it either. We never got a reason why this happened, and we hardly knew anything about them. And from the day we moved in, I felt like there were eyes on me. I was only 4, but to this day I can remember the sensation and how vulnerable it made me feel. The worst was the attic. It had been converted to a bedroom. And I know kids are scared of the dark and monsters under the bed, but this was different. It wasn't just a normal fear, it was nauseating. When I went up there, I'd feel heavy and sweaty and be overwhelmed by this angry sadness. Between the ages of 7 and 9-ish, I'd hear voices up there. They didn't say anything specific, they just whispered, and I could never make out what they were saying. Things eventually calmed down, the house felt quiet. Felt kind of peaceful and kind of light. Stayed that way until I was 17. My mother had just divorced my ex-stepdad when things started going down the hill again. At first, it was just feelings. Sadness, cold sensations, and some anger. Then the house itself started malfunctioning. Fire alarm would go off once a day. The pipes burst, the basement would constantly flood with sewage. And all of this could be chalked up to living in an old house. But everything started the exact day my stepfather moved out. At this point, I'd moved into the attic bedroom. My mom decided I was old enough not to share a room with my twin anymore. Didn't feel safe up there, but my twin wouldn't let me move back in with her. At 17, I would sleep on the floor in my mom's room. Otherwise, I'd be plagued with the most horrid dreams of hands reaching out from my closet and wailing. And one time when I was sleeping, 2 jars next to my bed made this popping sound and shattered for no apparent reason. I was sick all the time and my hair started falling out. Doctors couldn't find anything wrong with me. Finally, my mother decided that the house held, maybe bad memories from her marriage. She decided to sell it. I was so happy. Weird things still happened, though. Felt like they were escalating. A couple of days before we moved out, my twin and I saw the same apparition. Sounds kind of funny now, but it wasn't back then. I saw what looked like a shadow coming out of the floorboards. It was a tall man in a top hat, and he had no, definable features. I screamed so loudly and ran as fast as I could out of there. On the way to my mother's room, I ran into my twin, who was actually hysterically crying. She had seen long legs dangling from her ceiling. Her room was directly below mine. It was one of the scariest things that ever happened to me. We both slept in my mom's room that night, and eventually the time came to move out, and eventually in our new house was eventually normal. If I could say eventually enough. Life was normal, and I was happy to put all that stuff behind me. Occasionally think about it, but pretty much moved on. That was until last night where I had the most real feeling dream. In my dream, I saw a white light and glowing hands. Felt like it was saying sorry for not keeping me safe. I didn't speak, but I know that's what it was trying to say. I don't know why, but I know in my gut that this has to do with my childhood home. I know my story can be easily dismissed as like an overactive childhood imagination and living in an old house, but I know I'm not crazy. Whatever happened in my dream last night has made me feel that everything's come to a close. If you haven't read this, thank you. I just have to get this off my chest. And you are indeed correct. Everything has come to a close. See ya.